Hi, sweeties, and welcome back to another episode of Oh My Anime Podcast. This is your host, Mimi Hime, and today we'll be talking about the Crunchyroll Anime Awards. So, I just want to start off by saying if you're listening to this podcast now, it's too late for you to vote in the Crunchyroll Anime Awards. If you didn't know it was happening, it's been happening and you missed your chance. The voting period for the Crunchyroll Anime Awards was from January 15th to January 22nd, 2021. 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So, if you're hearing this podcast now, unfortunately, you won't be able to vote. You could have been voting daily, but like I said, you've missed it. So, anyway, Crunchyroll has been hosting these Crunchyroll Awards for a couple of years now, and at first, it really was just sort of this glorified popularity contest. No one really cared about it, it didn't really matter. However, in the last, I want to say, year or two, maybe 2 to 3 years, I'll cut them some slack. It's become more of a big deal as creators and publishers and directors have begun to win awards. They'll actually do a stream or send a video expressing their excitement that they won the award. So while it's still very much a popularity contest, it's definitely garnished some esteem recently. So this year, Crunchyroll did something different. It did something controversial that a lot of people took issue with. 2020 was a crazy year. I don't think anyone would disagree with me about that, but Crunchyroll was like, look, we're going to make it even crazier because they decided that when they picked and selected their nominees for each of the categories, they did their very best to not include any sequels or continuations. Yes, in some categories, some sequels and continuations slipped their way in, but for the most part, they essentially tried to only nominate shows that were from underground, new studios that were still popular apparently, but maybe not as many people saw them because they wanted to give other studios and other shows an opportunity to win instead of just having, say things like My Hero Academia and Attack on Titan, sweep every single category. So, on face value, or at face value rather, I think that's a great idea. I really do think it's important that we give smaller studios and smaller anime a chance. However, when you're talking about categories like Anime of the Year, I don't know how accurate it makes it if you're intentionally taking out the shows that everyone was watching, right? And I mean, I'm not saying that the shows that are in Crunchyroll's list for Anime of the Year are shows that nobody was watching, but there's definitely shows missing from the list that everyone was watching. And so I just don't know exactly how accurate the list is when you're intentionally omitting other shows. So the one thing that I think was most surprising for me was this is the first year in pretty much all of the anime awards years that I personally did not see most of these shows. I mean, usually in any given category, I've at least seen 3 out of the 6 because there's usually 6 nominees for each category. And I've usually seen at least 50%. 50% is usually the minimum that I've seen. And then I've usually at least heard of the others. And then, there might be the one or the two that maybe I heard of in passing, but it just never caught my interest, or I didn't hear a lot about it, what have you. This year has been a completely different experience for me because I don't know most of the shows. I've heard of most of them, but there are definitely some that I never heard of. And 2020 was crazy, but I don't think it was that crazy that I would have missed, some of these shows. So, I tried to be fair in my voting each day, but that voting was very, very biased this year because in some categories, I essentially voted for what I had actually watched. I didn't want to vote for things that I had not watched, that I had no opinion of, that I didn't even have a clue or an inkling what the show was about. So surprisingly, there were multiple categories this year that I did not even vote in because I didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to vote, since I would have literally been picking at random what show I was voting for. So I did have the opportunity to vote in a few of them daily. I obviously made the same vote each day because that was my true opinion. But today we're just going to go through each of the categories one by one. I'll talk about what I voted for or what I didn't vote for. And honestly, this might be a great way for me in 2021 during my down weeks to go back and rewatch, not rewatch, watch some of these shows that totally missed my radar entirely. So we're going to start with the nominees for Anime of the Year. There was Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Great Pretender, Appare Ranman, Jujutsu Kaisen, Dorohedoro, and Beastars. Now, I will admit that the only show on this list that I watched was Beastars. And to be fair, I really didn't hold the show in very high regard. I enjoyed the show. I never at any point got bored with it, but I definitely, when I did my top 10 of anime for the 2020 year, Beastars was not on it. It wasn't even on my radar. So it was really awkward because I ended up voting for it mainly because it was the only show I had seen. Now, I know many of you are probably now like, how did you not watch Jujutsu Kaisen? Now, let me explain. I am not a huge fan of shows with a lot of blood, gore, and stuff in it. And so Jujutsu Kaisen did not initially make my list of things that was a top priority for me to watch. Now I see that I do need to go back and watch it. So yes, I will go back and watch Jujutsu Kaisen. I'm sure my feelings about it will change and I will have wished I voted for Jujutsu Kaisen instead of Beastars, but in my heart of hearts, I couldn't vote for it now based off of hype because I hadn't seen it myself to make my own opinion about the matter. I had heard of Great Pretender for sure, and I had definitely heard of Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken. I think I heard of Dorohedoro maybe one or two times, but I never heard anyone in my circle of friends talking about it. I don't know anyone in my group of friends who was watching it. And Appare Ranman, I never heard anything about that show. I was looking at it and it was crazy because I'm usually pretty into PA Works shows because I really like that studio's animation style and quality. I really think that they have really beautiful visuals. Their characters are usually really interesting. I usually love I usually love everything by PA Works for the most part. And so I was surprised that I had just never heard of Appare Ranman. So that's definitely one of the shows for sure I'll probably start off with watching. But yeah, out of literally the 6 shows in Anime of the Year, I have only watched one of them, Beastars. So that's what I voted for. As controversial as that may be, you guys, I promise I will watch Jujutsu Kaisen, but for now, we'll move on. So the next category on the list is Best Protagonist. So the options were Natsume from Decadence, Yuji Itadori from Jujutsu Kaisen, Midori Asakusa, Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Katarina Klaus, My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, Anos Voldigold, The Misfit of Demon King Academy, and Shoyo Hinata from Haikyuu to the Top. So thankfully, I knew 50% of these. I knew half of these. I saw My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom. I saw The Misfit of Demon King Academy, and I watched Haikyuu. So obviously, as I mentioned before, one of those 3 picks was my best protagonist. I have never heard of Decadence. I don't know what that show's about. I don't know who Natsume is, so that came out of left field. I've heard plenty about Yuji from Jujutsu Kaisen. Haven't seen the show, and I don't know who Midori Asakusa is from Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken because I also did not watch that show either. So, ironically enough, My Next Life as a Villainess and The Misfit of Demon King Academy were in my top 10 shows for 2020. So, I believe I ended up picking Katarina Klaus because I just genuinely loved her character arc. The thing about Haikyuu is that, yes, I know that Shoyo is like amazing, but you know, there's that team element of Haikyuu that I just can't pass up, and that there's different people in Karasuno that I love just as much as Hinata, and there's so many people on the other teams, like from Nekomata, and just in general that I really love. And so while Hinata is the protagonist of the show, I care about a lot of the other characters on the team other than him. So I definitely couldn't pick him. And then Arnold Voldigold, I loved that show. I loved his personality, and overall the plot of the show was pretty fun and exciting to follow. But as a protagonist, there was nothing super special about Anos. Like, you know, he was interesting to watch, but there wasn't a lot of growth there. He kind of stayed pretty consistent through the entirety of the show. So that's really what led to me deciding on Katarina, because she was funny, she was growing, she was adapting. It was just so hilarious to see sort of the council of different personalities and personas in her head trying to make decisions to keep herself alive. So I just really totally enjoyed that. Next up, we have Best Antagonist. And on this list, I knew 4 out of the 6. I knew 4 out of the 6. Luckily, I knew about 5 out of the 6. And so we've got En from Dorohedoro, Rachel from Tower of God, Echinda from ReZero, Ryomen Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, Akito Soma from Fruits Basket, and Overhaul from My Hero Academia Season 4. So, I dropped ReZero. Another controversial thing. We'll talk about that later. Haven't seen Jujutsu Kaisen. Haven't seen Dorohedoro. So, I ended up going with Akito because I felt like he was the most traumatizing of antagonists for all of the main cast or the Zodiac family. Rachel was just infuriating, but I don't think that makes her the best antagonist. I just think that makes her the best, like, I don't know how to put it. Like, that show had weird pacing, so Tower of God is just not one of my favorites anyway. But Rachel was just more of an infuriating character. I didn't really see her as a good bad guy per se. Overhaul was definitely a huge bad guy in a very traditional sense, but I just loved Akito, so that's who I voted for. Next up, we have Best Boy. Best Boy was between Kaiman and Dorohedoro, Kun from Tower of God, Arnold Voldigod from The Misfit of Demon King Academy, Satoru Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen, Legoshi from Beastars, and Shoyo Hinata from Haikyuu. In this case, it was very easy to give the win to Hinata because he is so bubbly, he's so cute, he's so innocent, he's so passionate, so determined. I couldn't help but give it to him. He was just so amazing. And if you must know, my runner-up was definitely Legoshi from Beastars because he also had a lot of character development. I honestly felt for him so many times because he was always between a rock and a hard place, but Hinata's personality definitely edged out the victory for me to gain my vote for Best Boy. Next, we have Best Girl. Sayaka Kanamori from Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Noi from Dorohedoro, Abigail Jones from Great Pretender, Chizuru Mizuhara from Rent a Girlfriend, Katarina Klaus, My Next Life as a Villainess, and Kaguya Shinomiya from Kaguya-sama Love is War. So this was super hard for me because Chizuru Mizuhara from Rent a Girlfriend was like my waifu of the year. I love her. I would die for her. I think she's amazing. Katarina Klaus, I had already obviously voted as best protagonist, so clearly I love her because she has so much development. And then there was Kaguya Shinomiya from Kaguya-sama Love is War, and that's just like probably my most favorite anime comedy that has come out in like forever. So I had a really hard time picking between these three. Ultimately, I gave it to Kaguya Shinomiya because, for one, Kaguya Sama Love is War was my number one anime of 2020. It just was a phenomenal show. I think it's the only show last year that I gave a 10 out of 10. It just is my type of humor. I love the romance. I love the slice of life. I just love so much about that show. And Kaguya was such an integral part of all of those moments I loved in the show. So I gave Kaguya Best Girl. She's super cute. She's smart. She's rich. I just love everything about her. So enough said. Next, we have the Best Opening Sequence. And the options were from Easy Breezy, Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Wild Side for Beastars, Daddy Daddy Do featuring Airi Suzuki for Kaguya-sama, Kai Kai Kitan from Jujutsu Kaisen, GP for Great Pretender, and Phoenix from Haikyuu. I ended up giving it to Daddy Daddy Do featuring Airi Suzuki in Kaguya because, once again, that was my favorite anime of the year. I always loved the Kaguya soundtrack. I love just the tone, the sound, sort of that era of music that they picked. It's kind of got this very like old style sound to it that I love. So I went with that one for Best Opening Sequence. The next we have is Best Ending Sequence, and this was a category that I did not vote in. I did not vote in Best Ending Sequence because we have Lost in Paradise from Jujutsu Kaisen, Night Running from BNA Brand New Animal, Welcome My Friend from The Millionaire Detective, Balance Unlimited. We have The Great Pretender for Great Pretender, DD from Dore Hedoro, and Last Dance from Inspector. I didn't see any of those shows, so I don't know the openings, I don't know the endings, I know nothing about them. I had never even heard of BNA, but I see it's a Netflix show. I didn't see it. The Millionaire Detective, I think, was a show I was going to pick up, and then I heard that it got not canceled, but I think I heard it got delayed because of COVID, so I never picked that up. So yeah, I didn't vote in this category. I'm also pretty confident that I did not vote in Best VA Performance, Japanese VA, because the options were from Wave, Listen to Me, ReZero, Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, Jujutsu Kaisen, and The Millionaire Detective. Did not see any of those shows. Could not provide a appropriate opinion or vote towards that. For Best VA Performance English VA, they had the VA for Zeno Robinson, the VA Zeno Robinson, who voices Hawks in My Hero Academia. Then there was Oren Phillips, who voices Laurent Theory. I think that's how you say his name, from Great Pretender. We have Jonah Scott for Legoshi and Beastars. Crispin Freeman, who voices Zeus Sudra in Fate Grand Order. Absolute Demonic Front Babylonia. Johnny Young Bosch, Bam, for Tower of God. and Aniris Quinones. I don't know how to say that name. I'm so sorry. But she voices Echidna from ReZero. I voted for. Who did I vote for? Let me check. I think I voted for Hawks. For My Hero Academia. I like his voice. I don't typically listen to a lot of dub. Um, so I think part of this was, even though I had heard some of these um, in Japanese, I hadn't really heard the English, so I had to kind of go out of my way to go listen to the English. So Hawks was my vote on that. For Best Director, I obviously voted for Kaguya-sama because, once again, it was my favorite show of 2020, so why wouldn't it be my vote for Best Director if he, directed my favorite show? The other options were Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Jujutsu Kaisen, Decadence, Great Pretender, and Tower of God. For Best Animation, we had Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Great Pretender, Princess Connect Redive, The God of High School, Jujutsu Kaisen, and Beastars. I feel like, uh, even though I voted for Beastars because that was the show I actually watched, I'm sure these other shows that had, action and stuff in them probably had better animation in them than Beastars, but alas, I didn't see them, so I couldn't vote on them. So the next category is Best Character Design. We have who in these categories? We have Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, Tower of God, Great Pretender, BNA, Brand New Animal, and Yashahime Princess Half Demon. So this one was a hard one for me, mainly because even though I felt like Yashahime was good for character designs, I didn't feel like they did anything particularly, different about the character designs. So I did vote for Tower of God because I felt like, considering they, adapted it from the webtoon comic, I felt like the decisions they made for the character design from the comic itself were interesting and pretty close. I didn't see the other shows, so couldn't really have a good input on that. So, for best character design, I gave my vote to Tower of God. Next, we have best fight scene. We have Jujutsu Kaisen Satoru Gojo versus Ryomen Sukuna, Sword Art Online Alicization, War of the Underworld Part 2, Broccoli versus Dark God Vecta, The God of High School, Jin Mori versus Han Dawi, The God of High School again, Jin Mori versus Jegal Tak. I guess that's how you say his name. We have Deku versus Overhaul in My Hero Academia Season 4, and Brawler versus Master in Akudama Drive. My vote went for Deku versus Overhaul, My Hero Academia Season 4. Why? Because I didn't see anything else. I'm not a Sword Art Online fan, so I did not watch that show. As you all know by this point, I have not seen Jujutsu Kaisen. I did not watch The God of High School, and I have only vaguely heard of Akudama Drive. So, I feel like even if I had watched those other shows, it would have been pretty hard for them to overcome that Deku versus Overhaul fight for me, personally, because I felt like it was a pretty incredible fight scene. So, that was my vote for that. For Best Drama, we've got Fruits Basket, Great Pretender, Japan Sinks 2020, Sing Yesterday for Me, Beastars, and Somali and the Forest Spirit. So for this category, I gave it to Fruits Basket. Fruits Basket is definitely a childhood fave, so nostalgia definitely played a huge factor in my decision. Somali and the Forest Spirit, it was good. It really was good, but like I said, I really feel like the sentimental nostalgia of Fruits Basket really won that over for me for best drama, because with this being the remake, from the manga. There's just a lot in the new Fruits Basket that, I mean, it really brings out the drama and all the characters and the trauma and the childhood, post traumatic stress disorder, all of these things that I really enjoyed. So that won it for me. Next, we have Best Comedy. I really don't even think I need to go through all of the nominees, but I will anyway. But as soon as you hear what's in there, you'll already know what my vote is. So we've got Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, My Next Life as a Villainess, Kakushigoto, The Misfit of Demon King Academy, Sleepy Princess in the Demon Castle, and Kaguya-sama Love is War. Of course, I gave Best Comedy to Kaguya-sama Love is War. I did literally just say it's like the best anime comedy that's come out in a long time, and it was my only 10 out of 10 anime for 2020. So yes, it's the best comedy of the year for me. Next, we have Best Score. Best Score, we had Tower of God, Beastars, The God of High School, Great Pretender, Keep Your Hands Off of Eizouken, and Japan Sinks. This one was tough. I felt like Japan Sinks had a really great score. I felt like it was really, it had like a lot of emotion attached to it. I really can't remember the score for Beastars. Like I said, that show just really was very forgettable for me. So, which is very odd for me to say given that I did give it Anime of the Year since I hadn't seen any of the other shows, but alas, I really don't remember the score for it. Tower of God, I remember the score being pretty down the line, so yeah, I gave it to Kinsuke Ushio for Japan Sinks 2020. Next up, we have Best Couple. We have Nasa Yuzaki and Tsukasa Yuzaki from Tonikawa Over the Moon for You, Legoshi and Haru from Beastars, Katarina Klaus and Maria Campbell from My Next Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, Kaguya Shinomiya and Miyuki Shirogane from Kaguya-sama Love is War, Kotoko Iwanaga and Kuro Sakuragawa in Inspector, and Chizuru Mizuhara and Kazuya Kinoshita from Rent a Girlfriend. This was probably the most difficult category for me to pick from out of all of them because all of my favorites made it into the nominees. Nasa and Tsukasa from Tonikawa, Kaguya and Miyuki, Legoshi and Haru, Chizuru and Kazuya, and Katarina and Maria. Those were all my favorite couples from all my favorite shows this past year. So it was very difficult for me to pick which one I wanted. So the way I ended up ruling it down was that Chizuru and Kazuya never actually got their shit together. So I did not vote for them. Katarina and Maria were super cute, but nothing truly got established there. Like, they're best couple, but it's more like that show is very much like a reverse harem. So Katarina could have been with any number of people. It's not like they're a couple at the end of the show or even striving to be a couple. Like, everyone has a crush on Katarina. So I didn't count her. Legoshi and Haru, whatever. That storyline is more interesting because it has like that Zootopia feel to it. Yeah, not feeling it. So it came down to Nasa and Tsukasa versus Kaguya and Miyuki. Now, obviously I've been giving Kaguya-sama like all of my votes if it was in a category. But I ended up giving my vote to Nasa Yuzaki and Tsukasa Yuzaki from Tonikawa because they are actually a couple. They are a full couple in the series. The show is literally about them getting married and us seeing them be a couple. So I felt like they were the most appropriate vote for best couple. Though it pained me not to vote for Kaguya and Miyuki because they're so great together, but that's for another episode. The final category for the Crunchyroll Anime Awards for 2020 was Vote for Best Fantasy. Vote for Best Fantasy, the nominees were ReZero, Starting Life in Another World, Decadence, Doro Hedoro, Dragon Quest, The Adventure of Dai, Ascendance of a Bookworm Part 2, and Tower of God. So, on this category, I broke my rule. I voted for something that I do not watch, but I know for a fact that it is a better fantasy than the one show I did watch. And so the one show I had watched was Tower of God, and I really didn't enjoy Tower of God at all. So even though that's the only show I actively watched on in the nominees, I really didn't want to vote for it. So instead, I gave my vote to ReZero, because when I was watching ReZero and when I was keeping up with ReZero, I did think it was a great fantasy. I remember the world building being amazing. I remember a lot of the side characters and cast just being really magical and interesting, and things like that. So I actually voted for ReZero, even though I didn't actively watch season 2, because I just know that the best fantasy award could not go to Tower of God. So that is all of the Crunchyroll categories for 2020. We will likely follow up on all of these things come February, what was it, 19th? What was it? February 19th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tell me what you voted for. Are you surprised by Crunchyroll's decision to keep a lot of the mainstream popular shows out of the nominee list? Do you intend on watching the awards on February 19th? Let me know. And with that, thank you for listening to this episode. And remember, do something randomly sweet today. Bye-bye.